Hello everyone, welcome to Lucid Mains. In this video, we will take a look into the G20 grouping. This topic is crucial for your mains preparation, especially in GS paper 2. Also, aspirants can expect questions from this topic for their preliminary examination. In this video, we will take a look at what the G20 is, its origin, evolution, details about the latest G20, and concerns that plague the G20. First of all, let us see what the G20 actually is. The Group of 20 is a forum of the top 20 big economies in the world. These 20 members include 19 nation states and the European Union. Unlike the G7, the G20 consists of both industrialized as well as developing countries. Together, they hold around 66% of the world population, conduct 75% of the international trade, produce 85% of the global output, and make 80% of the global investment. Through this, it is clear that these countries dominate the world affairs. Now, let us go through the background of G20. The G20 belongs to a series of initiatives that were taken since the World War II to foster global cooperation in economic policies. Some of the other institutions that belong to this series are the Bretton Woods twins, namely the IMF and the World Bank, as well as World Bank. Two factors were the primary cause behind the creation of the G20. First of all was the massive debt crisis in the late 1990s, such as the Mexican peso crisis, 1997 Asian finance crisis, and the 1998 Russian finance crisis. Next in line was that many countries, especially the developing countries, felt that they were not adequately represented in the global governance arena. This feeling was high among countries such as China, India, and Vietnam. The initial talks of creating G20 started at the G7 Cologne Summit in 1999. Later on, in the same year, the G20 was inaugurated with its first meeting at Berlin. The G20, in its first meeting, put forth three primary objectives that it seeks to achieve. These included policy cooperation among the members to attain economic stability, promote financial regulations to avoid future crises, and lastly, to create a new international financial architecture. Now, talking about the members, as mentioned earlier, it has 19 nation states and the European Union as its permanent members. These nations are represented in the summits by the respective heads. Like in case of India, our Honorable Prime Minister represents them. In case of the European Union, representation is made by the European Commission. Besides these permanent members, various other nations and organizations take part in the summit. Spain, for instance, is a permanent guest to these meetings. Also, the country that hosts these summits usually invites some other non-members to the meeting. For example, the recently concluded 2018 G20 summit was held at Argentina, and Argentina invited Netherlands and Chile to the meetings. Some of the other participants in the summit are representatives of regional groupings and international organizations such as ASEAN, African Union, World Bank, OECD, and the International Labour Organization. Next, let's look into the structure of the G20. Most of its operations are managed by subgroups of member nations, but the G20 has no permanent secretariat. However, it has a well-laid track system in place to manage its operations. One of them is the Sherpa track, which focuses on non-economic issues like anti-corruption and food security. The economic and finance matters are dealt by the finance track. The chairmanship of this summit rotates among its members. For this, different subgroups are created. Since the chairmanship rotates every year, a system called Troika is put in place to ensure coordination among the past, present, and future hosts. Bits of information like this can be asked in the prelims, so it is advised that candidates take a note of these factors like Troika and Sherpa track. Now, talking about the evolution, the G20 rose to prominence after the 2008 global economic crisis. Before the crisis, the G20 was a meeting among the finance ministers of various countries. However, after the crisis, world nations realized that the issue can only be tackled through cooperation and collective will. So, they decided to upgrade the G20 into a high-profile summit meeting. So far, there has been 13 summits, the Argentine summit being the latest. The 2017 summit was conducted at Hamburg in Germany. Now, let's look into the Argentine summit. The summit comes at a time where the world faces issues like trade war and concerns over the protectionist policies of several countries like USA. The theme of the 2018 summit was building consensus for the fair and sustainable development. Based on this theme, the summit put forth three agenda priorities. First of these was to discuss on the future of work, considering rapid automation and loss of jobs for people. Next in line was creation of infrastructure for development in cooperation with private sector. The third priority dealt with creating sustainable food future. The summit witnessed intense meetings and bilateral discussions along its sidelines. The most important outcome of these are, first of all, the member nations have pledged their basic commitment to rule-based international order. Now, this commitment is vital, especially because countries like the USA have been violating the rules to promote their protectionist policies. The next major decision was an agreement to reform the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, especially its dispute resolution body. This is because for some time now, the appointments in the dispute resolution body has been in deadlock. This has rendered the dispute resolution body useless, so as to say. Another positive outcome from the summit is that nations have signed a joint communique. Now, a joint communique is a statement that is produced by members after a meeting. Why this is considered positive is because despite USA's dissent, the other members have reaffirmed their commitment to the Paris climate deal. This is a clear indication that the countries are ready to go ahead with the deal with or without the USA. Besides these points, the meet also paved way for the discussion on critical issues like the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi and the Russian issue on Ukraine. Now, let us look at the G20's significance for India. As we know, India is the fastest growing economy in the world. Hence, India joined the G20 realizing that it has a vital stake in ensuring global financial security. First of all, the major takeaway from this G20 is that it provided a venue for India to be a part of two trilateral partnerships. The first trilateral partnership was between India, USA and Japan, which was popularly dubbed as JIA. The next trilateral was between India, China and Russia, commonly known as the RIA. These two trilaterals are considered to be a success in India's act of balancing the countries of West and that of East. Also, India utilized the G20 as a platform to strengthen initiatives against economic offenders. For this, India put forth a 9-point agenda which calls for greater cooperation among its member nations. India has also suggested changes in the Financial Action Task Force, or the FATF, especially on matters of bringing about a standard definition to the fugitive economic offender. To enhance cooperation and share best practices, India has also suggested the creation of a common data sharing platform. India has also agreed to host the G20 in 2022, which also marks the 75th year of our independence. Now, moving on to the concerns part, critics have raised various questions about the effectiveness of G20. Many of the subjects in the joint communique is criticized for being watered down. For instance, there is no mention of the word protectionist. Another question is regarding the efforts of G20 nations in combating climate change. Despite highlighting their commitment towards the Paris Accord in the communique, the G20 nations continue to provide large-scale subsidies to fossil fuels. Also, another concern is the emergence of hard right-wing in various member countries like Brazil and Italy. This can make the future summits complicated on issues such as refugee crisis and public spending. Now, looking ahead raises the question of whether the G20 is relevant in today's world or not. Today, the world has started to retrace its growth trajectory since the 2008 crisis. Hence, countries have, at times, ignored the relevance of collective will. But they should realize that the G20 is essential to prevent another crisis like the 2008 global economic crisis. From the Indian perspective, the G20 presents a level playing ground. For instance, it provides a platform to raise India's concerns on India-specific issues like Pak-sponsored terrorism without being objected or vetoed by other countries. Also, the forums are vital for India's efforts to revamp global governance bodies such as the United Nations Security Council and the IMF. So, to conclude, for the G20 to survive and be effective, it needs to reimagine itself as a preventer of future recessions. Also, the G20 should stand up against unjust economic policies that have been on the rise in recent times. Only then can the stability of the future economic and financial environment be ensured. And this stability is vital for a growing country like ours. Thank you.